Hello, welcome to IELTS with Will. Today we're going to look at another writing task 1 type of essay. Let's look at process essays. Well, let's go. So in this lesson, we will first consider what process essays look like. Then we'll look at the structure, the grammar required, the vocabulary required, introductions, overviews, and of course, the main body of your writing. First of all, let's look at the kind of process essay. So what kinds of process essays are there? Well, there are linear, which go first, second, third, fourth, and then have an ending, or cyclical, which go around in circles and they never end. And of course, you've got natural, as made by nature itself, or man-made, as if manufactured in a factory, for example. So, what structure do we need for a process essay? Well, first we need an introduction. Then, importantly, we need an overview. Then we have main body paragraph 1, followed by main body paragraph 2, with possibly an ending in that paragraph. And the process that you describe should be very straightforward. It should be a beginning, then go to the next part of a middle, and then the next part, the end. You go straight forward from the beginning right to the end of the process diagram. All right, so we've got the structure. Well, let's look at grammar. What is the number one essential piece of grammar you must know for a process essay? Well, it's simple. The passive voice. It's an absolute essential to your process essay. If you do not use the passive voice, you're going to be very limited in the number of marks you get for grammar. So it's essential. So you don't only use the passive voice, although it is extremely important. You have to use other grammar, for example, present simple. So unless it gives you a date in the past in a process essay, use the present simple. And you have to write complex sentences. As we know, that gets you a lot of marks in IELTS. And we should try to use things like relative clauses. For example, what kind of vocabulary do we need? Well, again, vocabulary and grammar can be quite limited in a writing task 1. Particularly vocabulary. There is only a certain kind of vocabulary that you often use in writing task 1s, and in this case, in process essays. So, for example, we need linking words, yes, because we need that in all of our writing. So, linking words such as sequencing vocabulary, cause and effect vocabulary, and time connectors. They would all be useful in a process essay. Sequencing, for example. Well, firstly, that's a very simple one to use. Secondly, very predictable and simple. Next, then, these are the easy ones, the simple ones that you would say you must use something like this. But what about after that? That's a useful one. Subsequently, finally, lastly, at this stage, and in the final step. These are other alternatives. Instead of saying firstly, secondly, thirdly, fourthly, fifth, you can use other expressions to vary your grammar in sequencing linking words. Cause and effect. What do I mean by cause and effect linking words? Well, such as a result, consequently, therefore, this leads to, due to, and because of. Now, we've seen in IELTS Task 2 writing that we can use different words for due to and because of, so they could be useful also. And also, I mentioned time connectors. What do I mean by time connectors? Simple words like when, while, during, at the same time, once, before, after, subsequent to, and following. So as you see, it's a kind of limited amount of these words around, but we can vary them within the 150 words required for a writing task 1. So it's good to do that, to show that although the vocabulary is going to be limited, we have certain flexibility with the restricted kind of words. And you could also use words that are called quantifiers. Instead of saying many, 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 or some, We could say a certain amount, several, numerous, or we could use more qualitative vocabulary like thoroughly, carefully, efficiently, these adverbs. So again, this is another way to vary your vocabulary within the limited space of 150 words of a writing task one. So let's look at a process. What is a simple process that we know in everyday life? First of all, let's take one like make a cup of tea, for example. So that's a process. So how do we make a cup of tea, or how can a cup of tea be made? Then the steps are like this: boil water, prepare the cup, pour the water, steep for 3 to 5 minutes, remove the tea bag, and add milk, sugar, or lemon, whatever you prefer. So, this is a very simple process in everyday life, a very general process. So, if we had to change this into a more formal sounding process, like in the IELTS, for example, well, what do we do? Well, the first thing we should be doing is using passive voice. As I said, it's essential. You must use passive voice. So, first of all, let's look at the informal again. If you write it as a sentence, you would say it something like this: You boil water, you prepare the cup, you pour the water, you steep for 3 to 5 minutes, you remove the tea bag and add milk, sugar, or lemon. So that is a very informal way of doing it. Part of being informal is the fact that you start every sentence by saying you. It's like starting the sentence by saying I. Starting a sentence like this is quite informal and it's not useful for formal academic writing, for example. So if we take this very informal process and we have to change it to a formal process, the first thing we must do is remove you and change it using passive. So what does this look like? Here we go. Here's the formal. So you boil water becomes water is boiled. Then the cup is prepared. The water is poured. It is steeped for 3 to 5 minutes. The tea bag is removed and the milk, sugar, or lemon is added. So that's the more formal version of this informal general process that we do in everyday life, if we like cups of tea, of course. Here's another diagram similar to the IELTS. Now we're looking at the process of making olive oil, and we're asked to describe this process. So what should we do? Okay, so looking at the olive oil diagram again, we see a lot of words all over it, including words that can be used as nouns or words that we can use as verbs. So do not worry about using the words on the diagram. They are like labels. They're words that you can use, and in many cases you need to use in order to make clear what you're saying. However, the words that can be used as verbs, it's fine. So words like harvesting, for example, is a verb, and you can use this word harvest as a verb and change it to passive, and that's not a problem. So you can say are harvested, for example, or are deleafed, are washed, something like this. So you can use the words on the diagram, but you can also introduce new verbs and new words if they are good for describing what's on the diagram. But let's have a look at the kind of words that were in that diagram. So there's words like harvesting, cleaning, crushing, malaxing, extracting oil, filtering, bottling, and packaging. So these words are not so complex sounding, but they're obviously a lot different from making a cup of tea. So what kind of passives could we use when we're describing not a cup of tea, but making olive oil? And that sounds like a manufacturing kind of process. Well, we could say things like is harvested, are cleaned, is transported, that's a possibility, is subjected to, is processed, is crushed, is pressed, is separated, is stored, and is packaged. So perhaps we will use all of these passive expressions or some of them. But this is the kind of expression and the kind of grammar to expect when we're writing our essay on any manufacturing process, and specifically this one about olive oil. So I did ask one of my students to write an essay for this particular diagram, the manufacturing process of making olive oil. And so this is their answer. They gave me 2 paragraphs, which is a little different from what I suggested. I suggested 4: introduction, overview, and 2 main body. But they've given me 2-paragraph answer, so let's read it. So the first paragraph is 1 sentence. The diagram details the process of producing olive oil. Not a lot of detail there, and remember, detail is important when you're writing informally and academically, but it's true. And the second paragraph looks like this. So it may be a short essay, it may not have enough paragraphs, so that means it's going to be limited in the mark it will achieve in IELTS. However, there are some good things inside the paragraph. So let's have a look. So we see lots of uses of passive. So let's have a quick look. Are harvested, are collected, can be processed. I see is put, are collected, are stored. So this student, although he's not written enough this time, he has got some good things. He knows to use the passive voice in this kind of essay. So that's good. So it's not a terrible mark for grammar, at least. And he has other uses of relative clauses, for example. He uses which in there. And he uses other words like initially instead of firstly, and that's quite good. That's a good one. And finally, and after that, and next, and then. So there's some good stuff here. There's some good vocabulary also. It's just a pity he only wrote 2 paragraphs. And there's 1 or 2 errors. I highlighted one where he says, by the way. So by the way is an informal expression, and you don't want to use that in writing an academic. How many words? 124 words. So not enough words, so he'll lose marks, at least 1, because he's under the word count. However, there's some good vocabulary and some good use of passive voice and relative clauses, so not all terrible. We want to write this essay now, so we'll start with the introduction. That's the first paragraph. So this is what we should ask ourselves for completing our introduction. We should ask ourselves questions like this. What kind of diagram is this? Is it a man-made or natural? So this one is going to be man-made. It's the production of olive oil. What's the topic? Well, I just said it. The topic is the production of olive oil. What kind of process is this? So is it linear or is it cyclical? In this case, it's going to be linear. It's going to reach an end. Is there a time period on the diagram? We can look again later, but there's no time period on it, so no. So we use this information for our introduction. So here's our introduction. So here's our first attempt at the introduction. It's a little bit like the student's introduction we saw a moment ago. The diagram shows the process of producing olive oil. It's true, but not enough detail, and it does not include the detail we needed. So let's put that detail in. The diagram illustrates the linear man-made process of producing olive oil, detailing the various stages from harvesting to storage and sale. So this example has the details where we ask the little questions of ourselves. And if you notice, instead of the word shows, we've written the word illustrates because it's stronger, more formal vocabulary. And we should note that in our little diagram, the process essay included 9 steps, and that's important for our overview. So let's list them. It included harvesting, deleafing, and washing, collection vat, crushing, the malaxer, the centrifugal press, separation, decantation, and finally it goes in a storage tank. So these are 9 steps. Now we have to write our overview. We should ask ourselves some questions so we get the correct information for our overview. So how many stages or steps are there in this process? Well, we said 9, so we'll stick to 9. And what happens at the beginning, the end? Well, olives are harvested at the beginning, and at the end, the extracted oil is stored and distributed. And what is the raw material and what does it become at the end? Well, the raw material is fresh olives, and in the end, it becomes pure olive oil. So, this information we can now put into our overview. Okay, so here is our overview. Overall, there are 9 steps in total, starting with collecting the olives and finishing with the oil being packaged and sold. So that's our first overview. Can we improve it? Here we go. Here's the improvement, trying to include all that information. So overall, the procedure involves 9 distinct steps, beginning with the collection of olives and culminating in the distribution of the finished product. So look at the better vocabulary. Culminating is a much better word than finishing, so that's a useful word. And also we say 9 distinct, particular, clear steps, beginning with the collection of olives. So that's our overview. So for the main body, as I said, the basic way to do it is to use these words, these basic words. So we don't want to use all of them because it's very, very basic vocabulary, but we may need to use one or two. We'll see when we write it. So the main body takes 2 paragraphs, and it should be step by step, and it's a linear process. So we just go from one step to the next, to the next, to the next until we finished. Do not try to be complicated with this and show yourself to be very clever by changing the order. It's no point. We just need it very clear and simple, but with good words and good grammar. So we could say first, second, third, next, and then for describing things very clearly, but as I've showed you, we have some better words also. So let's look at the main body. We'll do a first attempt. So our first attempt is like this. First, olives are picked from trees, either by hand or with machines. After this, they are cleaned with water to remove any dirt or debris. Once cleaned, the olives are moved along a conveyor belt to a crusher where they are ground into a paste. At this stage, the stones are separated from the rest of the material. So this is quite a good answer. We have lots of passive, as you can see, and we've tried to stick sentences together and ideas together with the words we've talked about. So we used first, and then we used after this, and then once cleaned, and we connected sentences with where also. So we've got some good stuff here, good vocabulary, good grammar. Can we improve it? Well, as we said earlier, we mentioned that initially was quite a good word that my student used, so we'll use that one instead. And let's see, there looks like there's going to be a little more detail in this one because the paragraph's bigger. Let's see. So initially, olives are picked from trees, either manually, that's by hand, or using mechanical equipment. Following this, the harvested olives are washed thoroughly with water to remove dirt and impurities. Once cleaned, the olives are transported via conveyor belts to be crushed. In this stage, the olives are ground into a paste, and any solid fragments, such as stones, are separated. So there you go. That's a much better one. Why is it much better? Because there's a little bit more detail, and of course, there's one or two better words. And I like the use of, for example, instead of saying after this, it said following this, which is quite a good one. Once cleaned is still there, but there's plenty of passive for the grammar. So that's a good one. Both answers are good. The second one is even better. Main body 2, let's see. We described the next part of the process. We've described the first part. Now let's describe the second part. Here's our first attempt, and it looks quite a good one. Next, the olive paste is pressed under high pressure to extract the liquid. After pressing, the liquid goes through a separation process where the oil is removed from the water. The step is essential to ensure only pure olive is obtained. Finally, the olive oil is stored in containers and prepared for sale. The final product is then distributed to retailers for consumers to purchase. Okay, not bad. Lots of good, strong vocabulary, and use of grammar, particularly the passive voice. Here's the second version, which, as you see, slightly more, which suggests there's going to be more detail here. So next, the olive paste is placed into a pressing machine where it is subjected to high pressure. This pressing process is critical as it extracts the liquid content from the paste. Subsequently, the extracted liquid undergoes a separation phase in which olive oil is divided from water using a centrifuge or centrifugal press or a similar device. The pure olive oil, free from contaminants, is then stored in specialized containers to preserve its quality. Finally, the finished olive oil is packaged and distributed to retailers for sale. This entire process ensures that the oil produced is of high quality and suitable for consumption. So this has got a little bit more detail, but the basics are the same. You've got a lot of the passive voice in there, and then you're working on the vocabulary. Can you improve words from the first one to the second one? And as I said, the first answer is pretty good anyway. The second answer just improves on the vocabulary, giving a slight more detail than the first. So now, the next step is quite significant. Talking about a conclusion or an end. Well, in the process essay, a conclusion or an end is not necessary. You can do one, but it does not get you a lot of marks. It doesn't get you any marks, in fact, because the descriptors only require specifically that you include an overview of what's going to happen. But you cannot really come to a example, for example, because conclusions often suggest judgment or you're assessing something or you're giving an opinion if it's IELTS. There should be no opinion in writing task one, so it's unnecessary, and you don't want to do that because if you include opinion, you've got a problem with the marks. They don't want to. You could just give an end, but then it's very unnecessary. So what do you say at the end? That's the end of my description. So basically, you do not need to give an end. What you have are 4 paragraphs. You've got the introduction, overview, 2 main bodies, and that's really the end. You don't need anything else. However, if you insist on writing an end, it may look like this. This process is organized and ensures the olive oil is produced efficiently. The use of machinery in various steps helps to save time and improve quality. So if I read this as an ending to your task one process essay, I don't know if I like it because there is a suggestion of you giving me information that is not in the graph or is not in the diagram. It also suggests that you're giving a little bit of opinion here by saying it helps to save time and improve quality. So this would be slightly detrimental if I was marking your essay, because there's a hint that you're actually bringing into the essay things that are not there in the diagram. It's always a fine line when you do that. Are you giving me extra information or are you just explaining? You've got to be careful with that part. Another version, the use of various mechanical processes and precise steps ensures efficiency and consistency in olive oil production, reflecting a highly organized system. So in this one, ensuring efficiency and consistency, it's close. Is this opinion? Is this judgment? You're very close again with that. But the last part, reflecting a highly organized system, I think it's suggesting an opinion again, and this would not be good. So why write this last part? Because it can give you problems with your mark. So I suggest, and I strongly suggest, I strongly suggest that an end is not necessary for your writing task 1 process essay. All you need is the introduction, the overview, main body 1, main body 2, then goodbye. So I've shown you the following in this lesson. I've shown you what process essays look like. I've shown you the structure that you need, the grammar you need, and the vocabulary. I've shown you how to write your introductions with a little detail that will get you a good mark. Similarly with the overview, and I've shown you about the main body. The thing about writing task 1 is if you give these little details, particularly in the introduction and the overview, you could get a really high mark just for having these details mentioned. It's that kind of task. Anyway, so that's writing task 1 process essays. If you have any suggestions for videos, please leave them in the comments below. And please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time.